Now, what happens, you know, so people are saying, okay, there's the 4 steps. I could follow those 4 steps.
That's
but
right.
sometimes some of us are just want to jump to number 4.
That's
you
right.
know, or sometimes we look at, we find a solution, we think, okay, that's it, and you go after it, and you don't look at anything else. You just jump to conclusion, basically.
That's right. That's
How
right.
do people avoid doing that? Because we do that all the time.
We do it
whether
all the
it's
time.
with friendships, whether
Yes.
it's with your kids, your parents, you know, at work.
That's true. Well,
Because we want to solve a problem and move on, you know, and there's another one to solve.
You know, it's very, very common. The biggest problem with problems is that people do jump to cause.
Right.
And generally they do that because they have experience. Oftentimes people are solving problems in the area that they're experienced in, and they say, well, I saw that before, it must be the same thing.
Right.
And they jump right there. The issue is, I don't want to use the same word problem, the issue is if you don't do a good job, if you just jump to cause and you haven't been right, you'll be solving it over and over and over again. Right. That's the big issue. Right. And that's very, very common. To gather data means I have to spend some time, and a lot of people do not want to spend that much time.
Right.
That's right. They don't want to spend the time to do it.
Now, you know, everybody's different. Every human being is different. We kind of approach problems differently.
That's true.
How do you, when you're, let's start off with people who are in the work environment.
Yes.
You know, you're trying to work as a team. You have a problem you're trying to solve, and you know, I think the answer is this, and this person is going to think the answer is that, and you're just kind of butting heads because you're so strong thinking you have the right answer to the problem. How do you have those two come together to determine one, you know, maybe they'll get to the same conclusion, or maybe one has got the right answer over the other?
Well, you know, once again, that's a good question, Cindy, and that's why a process is so powerful. Because if you actually use a process, there are a series of questions that you answer. And as you answer those questions, what you do is it's not so much about the powerful person or the person who thinks they're right, is that person has got to have answers all along the way and then use common sense to see if things connect. You're playing a detective. What you're doing is playing a detective. You're being a mini CSI person. You have evidence, and now you're saying, what does it tell me? We're all looking at the same evidence. If I have really gone through the process, I have gathered evidence, and we're all looking at the same pile of evidence. And it becomes more of a collective effort than it becomes, you think this and I think this, we're looking at the same thing. Well, then let's try it out. If we see it differently, if we actually are making some different kind of inferences from the same evidence, let's go and do some verification. Let's do some experimentation. Let's put your thinking in place, or in fact, let's, I'm forgetting my third thought, but there's a few different ways that I can do it to find out which of us makes the most sense. Yeah.
Well, you know, and I would think that there's some points where you could skip through some steps. And for example, if all of a sudden my car stops working, I get out and I look that I've got a nail in my tire.
Sure.
I'd say, okay, I've got a bad tire. I got to go get, you know, call somebody to pick me up or get me towed or something. So, you know, you can kind of see something visually and do that.
Yes.
But now if I was driving along and I go and I all of a sudden stop on the side of the road, I can't drive, and I look and my tire's flat, now I'm kind of stuck because I don't know. Visually, I can't tell. You know, I mean, at that point, people have to start the problem solving, or you know, or they'll let the you know, mechanic or somebody at the shop do that. But
you know, there are some problems that the cause is obvious, and I don't have to go through all of that. I'm talking about problems where I don't really know why it's happening. That's a very good point you're making, because there's a lot of things that I can very quickly assess. They're not that complex. They're not that complicated. I can see the cause very rapidly. I see the cause, and so I run right through it. It's only when I don't. The process I was talking about is when it's not clear.
It's not obvious.
It's not obvious, and it's not clear. And so that's what you want to go through, because the truth is, if you don't, people are reliving these problems over and over again. That's one of the big issues in business, is that people solve problems, and then they solve them, and they solve them. And they spend a lot of time resolving the same problem. Yeah.
Is documentation part of it? Because when you say that, I always think about, you know, well, if there's documentation from the person before, or it's documented somewhere, or somewhere can go and say, okay, well, this happened before, and this is what they did to solve it. You know, so you don't spend at least the same time trying to go through the discovery phase.
That's absolutely true. Yes, documentation is very big.
Right.
Yes.
What about gender? men and women, do they look at and approach problems differently?
You know, not really.
Okay. Because
It
you think
isn't
that
so
people would
much-
think that they would.
I know
but-
people would think
yeah.
that they do, and it's not so much about your gender. It's just certain people have the ability to be very linear in their thinking, and there are people who are much more comfortable with a high degree of detail.
Okay.
And if you can't do those things, then it's very difficult for you.
Right.
I go to someone and I say, when did the problem start? Because the person operates that machine. When did that problem start? Well, last week sometime.
Right.
No, I need to know what day. I don't know what day.
And why does it matter?
sometime.
You know,
what's the
Monday,
big deal,
Tuesday, who
right.
cares? Yeah.
Because their mind doesn't work that way. And that's a frustration for them. They don't go to that level of detail.
Right.
So for people that don't handle detail or are not very 1, 2, 3 in the way it's harder for them to do that kind of problem solving. And it's really not related to gender at all.
Right.
No.
You know, and as you speak about some of it makes me think there's a couple different types of problem solving ways that you have to look at. Because if I look at, you're looking at a complex problem at work, you've got an issue, groups are coming together to figure out how to, do something. But what happens if you're home, and let's talk a little bit maybe if you're in your personal life.
Sure.
And it's a husband and wife, they're married, somebody's got to take out the trash, that's a problem. Neither one, or somebody has to wash the dishes, or neither one wants to do, how do you sometimes approach those type of problems? Which, you know what the answer is, someone needs to do it, we have to
Yes.
figure out a schedule to do it.
All right.
How do you end up working through some of those personal problems
Okay.
that can come up that maybe aren't exactly a work-specific issue that you're trying to address?
I'm going to put that question in a little different category, because what you're really talking about are making decisions.
Okay.
Making decisions. And a decision is really choosing between some alternatives.
Okay.
When I'm looking at a problem, I have something that's wrong. And so I'm trying to find out what's wrong so I can fix it. But when I have decision making to do, that's a very different thing. Now I'm choosing, I have this alternative or that alternative, or maybe many others. And then the question is, which of those is the best?
Right.
And I try to create some criteria to do that.
Now, is that criteria specific to what your decision is about? And I
Yes.
was very careful not to use the word problem.
That's right.
Because I think we use it a
That's
lot.
right.
I got a problem. Nobody takes out the trash. Well, it's like you
Yeah.
put it, you're trying to decide it's a decision.
It's
You
a
don't really have a
decision.
problem there.
It's a little bit different thing.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to the thing of problems for just a minute, because sometimes we don't go through all of what I've said.
Right.
Sometimes it's too costly and it's too time consuming. We all have situations in our lives or at work where we do what I call interim fixes. I do some Band-Aids, I do some firefighting, I do some tourniquet, whatever your terminology is. I have got a crack in my wall, and sure many people have the same thing. And what's the easiest fix? I put a picture over it.
Right.
So I didn't find out
You don't really want to
why.
find out
I
if it's a
don't-
foundation
That's right, I'm
or
not
if the
going
cement
to.
was poured
That's
in the
exactly
winter
right.
when it shouldn't, going back how many years. You
That's
just
right.
want to put the picture
I'm
over
just going
and
to put the picture over
don't
it.
have to deal with it.
How many times we're at work and the fax machine doesn't work, the printer doesn't work, and I just I go next door and I print it off.
Yeah.
And so I've done something. I've sort of got around it. How many plants have I walked through where they put these mats out to collect oil, and then when the mat's full of oil, they put another one out. They're not finding out where the oil comes from. It's quicker just to put the mat down.
Right.
So interim fixes, they don't fix anything, but they deal with the symptom. They deal with the symptom. And we do that a lot. And sometimes it's the most appropriate thing, because fixing it, finding the cause, would be very costly, very time consuming, perhaps not worth the effort. You
Right.
have to make that decision.
Right, it has to be some kind of balance,
Yeah.
because like you said, that just might be the thing to do at that point in time.
Yes,
you know,
exactly. Yeah, it
Trying
might
to
make
find
the
a root
most sense.
cause.
Right.
Well, and it could be that you do implement something, and before you know it, it comes back. You thought you fixed it because you thought you
That's right.
honestly had the right answer, and it comes back, and now you have to readdress and say, okay, well, that didn't work, or it worked for a month or two.
That's right.
Of course, you might try and just redo that one for a month or two, keep it kind of going, because sometimes we can procrastinate because there's a lot of things to do, and we don't
Yes.
have a lot of time. So,
Right.